Hi guys, my name is Faustina, and about 4 years ago, Jesus led me to discover the revelations he gave to his servant, the servant of God, Luisa Picaretta, a book that he calls the Book of Heaven, the call to the creatures, to the order, to the place, and to the purpose for which they were created by God. He led me to these revelations. They radically transformed my life, and now I feel called to proclaim the good news and tell everybody about this because it's the most amazing thing ever. In these revelations, Jesus talks to Luisa about the gift of living in the divine will, and he tells her that this is the original gift that Adam and Eve possessed before they fell, and it's that same gift that the saints in heaven, whenever they die and go to heaven, it's the same gift that they will receive when they will go to heaven, although Adam and Eve had it while they were alive. But now is a time in history, he tells Luisa, where it is now open for anybody to receive this gift of living in the divine will, and it is the answer to the Our Father prayer. So it is pretty incredible, and I have another video about this where I go more into depth, introduction-wise, about what the gift of living in the divine will is, and more about the Book of Heaven and Luisa Picaretta and all that stuff. You can find that video by searching, I believe it's called This Will Change Everything. What is the gift of living in the divine will? And yeah, I highly recommend you watch that video before you watch this video because I don't think this video will make much sense if you don't watch that video. My first video is an introduction to what the gift of living in the divine will is that Jesus talks about in the Book of Heaven, but this video will be about how to receive the gift of living in the divine will yourself and how to live it out. Bring up this chart that I made of the way of holiness as described to us by the saints. So this is what the church has learned about growth in the spiritual life the past 2,000 years, is that we go through stages as we progress along the Christian life toward deeper and deeper union with God, right? So this circle right here, this outermost circle, represents all the souls in the world who have not begun their Christian journey, right? So this is souls who have not begun trying to root out sin in their lives and follow God, right? So this is a vast majority. So this is a pretty good part of the population. Okay, the next one is souls who have begun on their Christian journey and have started to root out sins. They are trying to get sins out of their life. They are trying to break their wills so that they no longer want to sin. Somebody in the illuminative way, as they grow closer and closer into the next stage of the spiritual life, is more enlightened on the things of God and is beginning to become more and more inspired and on fire to be with God, and sin is becoming less and less of a problem in their life, and at a certain point virtually ceases. And then the unitive way is when a soul is basically holding hands with God's will. Like this yellow circle symbolizes God and his will, and yeah, a soul in the unitive way is as close as you can possibly get. And the greatest saints of our times got super, super, super close, right up to the tip of God, and it's like they were married. There's a spiritual marriage that happened. They were touching each other. They were two wicks of a candle that became one flame. The unitive way is known as the final stage of Christian perfection. A soul in the unitive state has a constant awareness of God's presence and habitually conforms to God's will. In this stage, the soul loves God and others without limit. And of course, as long as we're on earth, we are still a work in progress, of course, and we will never be completely perfect until we reach heaven. But a soul in this state has reached a certain degree of perfection in their will, and they've been purified to such an extent that they really aren't moved by the temptations and the inordinate passions that may come up within them. They no longer have a desire for those things. They're truly, truly dead to the world. Like a soul in this stage in their walk with God is basically a soul that can say, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. They don't live for themselves at all. They live for God, they live for others, and they would truly rather die than commit an intentional venial sin, right? And it's a progression. What we know about the spiritual life is it is a progression. First, you have to make that decision that you want to really follow Christ, and then you have to, cooperate with grace, do the background work that you need to do to root out sin from your life. Mortification, penance, doing good works, practicing virtue, rooting out vice, praying, often are things that are necessary in the purgative way to move us to the next stage, into deeper and deeper union with God. And the more free we become, the more free from sin, the more free from our attachments to the world, the quicker we can attain this union with God. Now, why do I explain all of this? Because it is very important to understand that the gift of living in the divine will is not a magic wand that poofs us and allows us to bypass and skip all of the previous stages of growth that were necessary for the Christian life. Jesus tells Louisa in these writings, which I'll remind you from my last video, these writings, they're private revelation. They have been approved by the church, so the church has said that there is no heresy in them, but you are free to believe them or not to. I believe them very much. I recommend that you believe them, but basically what Jesus tells Louisa in these writings is that, yes, the gift of living in the divine will, it is the original holiness that Adam and Eve possessed. It's the holiness that our Blessed Mother possessed. But for us who were born in original sin, who were fallen, we still have to go through a purification. Mary didn't have to be purified. Adam and Eve were already pure before they fell. And this is the life of heaven. This gift of living in the divine will, it is given to us now in these times, and the saints of the past 2,000 years before Louisa in the 1800s, late 1800s, this gift was not available for any of them. This ability to live with the eternal operation of God operating from within them, just like the saints do in heaven, but on earth. This gift is not available until now, but just because it's not available until now and we have this gift, it doesn't mean that we can just bypass all of the past. The saints were necessary, very, very necessary for us. They got us to a place in our understanding in the church where we understand the necessity of purgation, where we understand how to go about journeying toward union with God. The saints teach us how to be saints, and we need them because, we need to be saints, living in the gift of the divine will. The sanctity of the divine will, Jesus tells Louisa in these writings, it encloses all other sanctities. So we are not leaving anything behind. So it's very important, I think, to understand the spiritual life, to understand what the saints taught us. I mean, personally, before I found divine will, God put me on kind of a crash course of the saints. I listened to an audiobook of Interior Castle. Highly, highly recommend. I listened to Saint Therese Little Flowers writings. He set me on fire for discovering as much as I could about the faith. I would listen to Sensus Fidelium homilies on YouTube. These prepared me and disposed me to be able to really actually fly in the gift of the divine will when it came to me. So briefly going back to this chart, I want to recall. So this is the ways of achieving union with God as taught to us by the saints, which are very important to understand because ultimately they lead us to the gift of living in the divine will. So if you recall in my introduction to what is the gift of living in the divine will video, I used a little mandarin orange as a symbol for the divine sun, S-U-N, the symbol for God and his operating will, which is basically an analogy for the sunshine of grace that God gives all of the souls in the world, past, present, and future, right? Because God, this yellow circle, the sun, he lives outside of time, right? And so on the way of holiness, the souls of all generations, past, present, and future, even if they are in this outermost circle and they don't want anything to do with God, they are still benefiting from God. They're still benefiting from his preserving act, from his holding them in existence, right? And then souls in the purgative way, they're benefiting from God, from the sun coming out of God, helping them get the grace to defeat sin, and the same in the illuminative way, moving more
moving more and more closer to him, and the same in the unitive way. And so a soul in the unitive way is holding hands with the eternal operation of God. The soul in the unitive way really wants what God wants, but the soul in the unitive way does not live in God. Does that make sense? So the difference between being united to God, like the souls of the past, as you can imagine, going back, there's 2 wicks and 1 flame. But a soul who lives in the divine will, it's like the 2 candles and their wicks dissolve into each other and become one. And there is 1 flame as well. So this way of living that God gave to Luisa Picaretta, which was really the original plan that Adam and Eve possessed and that our Blessed Mother possessed, but is now available for souls who were born in original sin, is that they would move from these outer white layers and go into this yellow layer, into the sun, which is God. So you could say that this right here is the gift of living in the divine will. Although, I do want to be clear, this might be a little bit confusing, so I want to make this clear. You do not have to already be in the unitive way in order to receive the gift of living in the divine will. There are no rules. There is a certain disposition of heart that is necessary that I will go into later, but you can be, for example, I believe a soul can be in the illuminative way, possibly even in the purgative way, and still be living in the divine will. And who knows, maybe they could even be not even knowing anything about God and still be living in the divine will. Honestly, it's a mystery only God can really, really comprehend. There is a certain disposition of heart that he's looking for that not everybody will have. But the difference is we can now live in God. So it's not about how virtuous you are that you can live in the divine will, but it's about this special gift of God that you can come to be dissolved into the sun. And then look at this, like so remember the sun is spreading out rays of light, rays of grace to all souls past, present, and future, helping them along their journey wherever they are. And a soul who lives in the divine will gets sucked up into that eternal operation, and this yellow symbolizes being outside of time and space, right? And they are diffusing with God, and all of their acts, they're acting along with God, right? Because it's 1 candle, 1 flame. And so they're spreading grace over all souls, past, present, and future. So that is the gift. That's the difference between the 3 ways of the spiritual life and toward union with God, and the sanctity of living in the divine will, fusion with God. Union with God, fusion with God.
Alright, now the rest of this video is going to be about how to enter into that fusion of wills, how to possess the gift of living in the divine will. Now what I'm going to say, I want to make this as a disclaimer. These writings are not the most black and white. They're not the most clear. Kind of a little like scripture. There is not an official doctrine on the divine will, on every passage in the divine will, and some things can be taken, one way or another. Jesus speaks in poetic ways very often, and so, there are a lot of different interpretations out there. A lot of different teachers say different things, specifically about how to receive the gift of the divine will, because there is not an official doctrine out yet. And so, I want to make that disclaimer that take everything I say, take everything everyone says with a grain of salt, knowing that the best way to really, really come to understand the divine will is to read it yourself, to dive into it yourself. Teachers can help, but never take anybody as a master. There is no expert on the divine will, no matter how long they've been studying it or teaching it, or what qualifications they have or don't have. Like, only Jesus is the expert and the teacher on the divine will, and he will teach you. If you have specific questions, ask him and he will answer you. In my opinion, the 3 ways of the spiritual life that we went over are helpful for us to understand and helpful for us to strive in growing in, because, in my opinion, a soul who is living in the unitive way is almost definitely completely disposed to receive the gift of living in the divine will. A soul who is living in the illuminative way, I think, is a bit less likely to be disposed to living in the divine will. And a soul who is living in the purgative way I would say is not very likely to be disposed to receive the gift of living in the divine will. And I say that because now, while Jesus says this is a gift and not a virtue, he makes it clear that the only thing that is necessary to receive the gift of living in the divine will is to firmly desire it. I think emphasis on the word firmly, and I think a lot of times this is glossed over, and when teachers teach about living in the divine will, they say it's very easy to receive the gift. All you have to do is want it, and then you just ask for it and it's yours. Well, to me, that way of thinking about it kind of makes it seem like a magic wand type thing. Like you can just have it and then put it away, kind of borrow it, going back and forth, in and out. I don't really agree with the language or the idea that you borrow the gift of living in the divine will. Sometimes when you feel like doing God's will, but then abandoning it when you want to do your own will.
Listen to this writing from Volume 35, January 2nd, 1938. You must know that to begin living in my will takes a decision on the part of God and a firm decision on the part of the creature to live in it. Now this decision is animated by a new life, a new divine strength, so as to render the creature unconquerable by any evils or circumstances of life. This decision is not subject to changes, because when we decide, we do not deal with children who play with their decisions, but with the one who we know must persevere.
I don't think there is that kind of a back and forth motion with the divine will. That's my opinion. I think it really is an all or nothing thing. Like, if you want to receive this gift, you need to want it and it alone. You need to desire this to be your everything. So yes, all that is necessary to live in the divine will is to firmly desire it, but emphasis on the word firmly. Jesus says in Volume 18, December 25th, 1925, the gift is given only to one who is disposed, to one who will not waste it, to one who will esteem it and love it more than her own life. So much so as to be able to sacrifice her life in order to let this gift of my will have supremacy over all, and to be taken into consideration more than life itself. Even more, that her own life be nothing compared to it. Therefore, first, I want to see that the soul really wants to do my will and never her own, that she is ready to make any sacrifice in order to do mine, and that in everything she does, she always asks me for the gift of my will, even just as alone. And to go back, when he talks about that even just as alone, in the earlier writing, he was giving a comparison between the state of Adam before the fall and the state of Adam after the fall. And he says that the state of Adam before the fall, it was like he possessed the gift. He possessed the gift of living in the divine will, but then like after he fell, it was, and the sun went back into the sky outside of him, it was like he would go up to it. He would go up to the sun and ask for commands, right? And the sun would move and give him more commands. And so he didn't possess it as his own. He was borrowing the sun's commands, as you could say. So that's the analogy. When Jesus speaks about giving the gift on loan or a soul borrowing it, I interpret it, and I think it's pretty clear. People will disagree, but in my opinion, that's not referring to going back and forth with having the sun inside of you and then outside of you and then inside of you and outside of you. I think it just refers to the state of borrowing the gift of the divine will means that you are doing God's will, like the sanctity of the saints of the past before this gift was available. And if you possess the gift of the divine will, then you're living in it, right? So he's telling her that the soul needs to first dispose themselves to receive the gift of living in the divine will by doing the divine will. We don't skip over this. Like, you cannot live in the divine will without doing God's will. When I see that she does nothing without the loan of my will, without trying to do my will, because by asking for it over and over again, she has formed the void in her soul in which to place the celestial gift. And so I see it as we have to first dispose ourselves. We have to first dispose ourselves to make space in our soul to receive the great, eternal, immense, infinite gift of living in the divine will. We have to make room for the Son to come inside of us. And that room is formed by digging a hole into our soul, you could say. And every time we do God's will, it's like a shovel is placed down in there. And then every time, God gives us something, gives us something really, really hard that he wants us to do, and then we do it. It's like a mega hole is dug into our soul, right? And the suffering love increases how deep this hole can be dug. And at a certain point, when God sees that the soul has formed the void, the space in which to place the celestial gift, then they are ready, and he will give it to them. So I think these two things may seem to contradict each other when Jesus says, all that is necessary is to firmly desire to live in the divine will, and then it's done. And that, well, first, in order to dispose yourself to receive the gift, you have to have grown accustomed to doing God's will. I don't think these things actually contradict each other. I think that they actually shed light on each other on how to correctly interpret the writings. Because when you put these two things together, you see that it's not just a willy-nilly desire. It has to be a very firm one, and it has to be really an informed desire. Like, if you're going to get married to someone, because really, living in the divine will is living the life of heaven on earth, and that is a marriage to God, really. Like, living in the divine will, see it as a marriage to God. You do not take that decision lightly, right? And it's true. It's easy to get married to God. He loves you. Like, you will love him once you get to know him, and, like, it's very simple, just merge together, get married to God. It's a very simple, easy thing to do, but you can't just make the decision like that if you don't really understand what you're getting into, right? And so, yeah, all it takes is desire, but a firm desire, and one that is informed. I don't think it's possible to sincerely desire to live in God's will if you don't already have a taste for doing God's will. You may hear about it and think, oh, that sounds like a wonderful thing, and oh, wow, the eternal operation, that's amazing, wow. But truly, in essence, doing God's will and living in God's will, you can't have one without the other. Sin does not exist in living in the divine will. And so if you're not accustomed to doing the divine will, you're not actually going to know the true reality of what it is to live in the divine will. Therefore, you're going to be desiring something you don't necessarily know about, if that makes sense. Like, a young girl an 18-year-old can be like, oh wow, marriage sounds wonderful. I mean, some 18-year-olds can get married and it's wonderful, but some are not quite ready for that kind of decision. And if they hear, oh wow, this man is wonderful, and the wedding is going to be so much fun, and we're going to live in this house, and it's going to be perfect, and there's going to be no problems, and it's just going to be wonderful, and my husband is going to do everything that I want, and our kids are just going to be perfect. Yes, I want to get married. Yes, I have a firm desire. I want to get married. But then later, like, the church could actually, if the girl gets married and then finds out later that, like, marriage wasn't really what it was cracked up to be, and maybe like 10 years later she realizes that she really made a mistake. She married the wrong person. This wasn't right for her. She can actually file for an annulment, and the church can look at it and realize, like, yeah, this was not a valid marriage, because this girl, like, she never actually really got married because while she had a firm decision, she was too immature. She didn't actually understand what she was saying yes to, right? And so I don't know, that was a simile that had come to me about, like, how to receive the gift of the divine will. Yeah, a firm decision, but an informed one. This needs to be a mature and real decision that you could say the church would look at, in the analogy speaking. Like, this person was mature enough and understood what they were saying yes to. If you don't understand what you're saying yes to, then it doesn't work. I don't think it works. In my opinion, unless God can see the disposition of your heart and see that you are disposed to those things, but, like, to the sacrifices that are coming, really. But you also might not be. And so I think, I could be wrong, like I said, this is my opinion. I think there are some people, now I'm not thinking of anyone specifically, but just in general, I think there are some people who are hearing about the gift of living in the divine will, hearing about all that's necessary is a firm desire to, like, want to live in it, and then they just say, yeah, I want to live in it, and then they say, the magic words, Jesus, I trust in you, I give you my will, please give me yours in return, and then they believe that they are living in the divine will, but, like, really they're not, because they don't yet have a firm desire to stop sinning. Like, they don't yet have the completely, like, not just a 99% desire to cut sin out, like a 100% desire to be all in for God. They don't yet understand that, you know, this means that I will have to embrace the cross. Like, this means that I will have to die to myself. And so they don't really know what they're saying yes to, and therefore they don't really have the capacity to make a firm decision, if that makes sense. Okay, so to give you some help in making an informed, firm decision, I'm going to explain a little bit deeper about what living in the divine will is really all about. Now, don't let the things that I'm going to say discourage you, because I'm reminding you, you don't have to be at this state of perfection yet, but you have to desire to be there. Because if you start to live in the divine will, there are different degrees of living in the divine will, and you will become more and more purified as you grow. But the key is that in your heart of hearts, in your will, you don't desire, because the heart is the desire, right? You don't desire to be attached to anything. The sun in this heart here is the sun. It symbolizes God. You don't desire, and this is you don't desire to be attached to these people and things anymore, and to yourself. You desire to be attached only to God. I think that really is the only disposition necessary to receive the gift and to begin the purification process, because He will begin to purify you and remove things. Like, you can still be imperfect. We're all imperfect. I'm imperfect. Even Louisa was, in some ways, imperfect, even after she had been in the divine will for years and years and years. But the key is that her desire was pure. Like, she desired, not 99.9% to do God's will all the time, and to not be attached to anything, and to never sin again. She desired it 100%. And if you can, in your heart of hearts, move that desire up from a 75% to an 80% to a 95% to a 99% to a 100% desire to be rid of all sin, to be completely belonging to God, then that's all that's necessary to live in the divine will. And He will purify you and perfect you, and you will fall in different ways, but it won't be a decision of your will to go back on that intention of wanting to be perfected, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll get more into that later. I'll get more into the 4 degrees, but yeah, just know that you just need to desire these things I'm going to read. You don't need to be there yet. My daughter, the living in my will brings with itself the loss of any right of one's own will. All the rights belong to the divine will, and if the soul does not lose her rights, it cannot be called true living in my will. At the most, it can be called living resigned, conformed. In fact, living in my will is not merely that she does her action according to my will, but that the whole interior of the creature gives place to neither one affection, nor one thought, nor one desire, and not even one breath in which my will does not have its place. Nor would my will tolerate even just one human affection of which it is not the life. It would feel disgusted to let the soul live in my will with her own affections, thoughts, and other things which a human will could have. And do you think it is easy that a soul would willingly lose her rights? Oh, how difficult it is. Rather, there are souls who, when they reach the point of losing all their rights over their own will, draw back and content themselves with conducting a life in the middle. In fact, losing one's rights is the greatest sacrifice that a creature could do, but it is the one which disposes my goodness to open the doors of my will for her, and letting her live in it, to give her my divine rights in exchange. That was really important. Let's repeat that. Losing one's rights is the greatest sacrifice that a creature could do, but it is the one which disposes my goodness to open the doors of my will for her, and letting her live in it, to give her my divine rights in exchange. So, this gift of living in the divine will, we have to understand, it is the greatest gift. Not only is it the greatest gift that God has ever given to mankind, or ever will give to mankind, it is the greatest gift that God possibly could give to mankind. it is forming the creature into a living host, to be a living Eucharist, and letting her share in divine merit, truly. Like, he is giving her everything that he has, truly, literally, in every sense of the word, without holding back anything. And in order for that to happen, though, the creature needs to do the same for God. We have to give him everything in order for him to give us everything, because if we don't, then there's not going to be space in our hearts for the divine will. If we are holding on to our human will, even just one tiny fraction of a percent. So, yes, all that is necessary is a firm decision to live in the divine will. But that implies making the decision that you want to lose all your rights. A firm decision that you are willing to lose all your rights. Are you willing to do that? And that is a serious question, and I think one that, we should not take lightly, that we should really think about, because God doesn't want slavery either. Like, it's okay if this makes us uncomfortable. It's okay if you only want it, because that's the first step. It's normal that this kind of thing would be very difficult, because Jesus says that this is very difficult, and a lot of people don't want to do this. He talks about how rare it is to find a creature who actually wants to lose their rights and to give themselves utterly to God. It's not easy, but if you want to get there, I think that's enough. For those of you who don't know, that was my experience, really. It was before I found the gift of the divine will, or Lewis's writings, but God was letting me know that my heart was attached to different things, and that he wanted me to be completely detached of everything. He wanted me to go from this, I kind of got an interior image of this, to this. And this is about 4 years ago, and it was the beginning of my new life. This is how I think of it. Like, I recognized that I was a good, faithful Christian Catholic girl, like doing what I'm supposed to be doing and stuff. Kind of. I did not have Jesus as the absolute all-encompassing center of every aspect of my life. I guess you could say I was conceding life to my own thoughts, dreams, goals, desires. Like, I had my own identity and my own plans, like, set up in different ways. And I was not completely detached from everything. I was not 100% all in for him. And the fact that he was asking me to be this way, that he was inviting me to be this way, was scary to me, and I kind of didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I also wanted to do it at the same time, so I was conflicted, because I knew that this was the only thing to make me really happy, and, like, I also loved him. Like, I wanted to do it for him, but I also didn't want to at the same time, and, like, it's scary to lose yourself. Like, I mean, when you think about it, I think this thing he was asking me to do was basically describing that, like, will you lose all your rights for me? Like, not just exteriorly the things that you do, but, like, interiorly, like, your attachments, your affections, your desires. Like, do you trust me enough to let go of everything and to be like this? My answer was no. I really didn't. I wasn't ready for that. But I told him that I wanted to want this. I wanted to be there, and I started asking him to help me. And I gave him permission to change the desire of my heart, and I actually begged him to, and that was, like, my only prayer for months, actually. I just gave him permission to detach my heart from everything and everyone, and attach my heart only to him. I gave him permission to change me interiorly, and to, I guess, now that I think of it, like, I was giving him permission to take away my rights, and to increase my desire to lose my rights. And he did. He answered that prayer. It was nothing fancy, nothing special, just giving him that full permission. And it was consistent. It was a consistent prayer. I didn't give up on it, and I was striving to cooperate with his grace, and little by little, after a few months went by, then I started wanting to go to daily mass, and I started wanting to go to daily adoration and praying the rosary, and then that just kind of exponentially increased it, and then a couple months later, I just exploded. I ended up making a general confession of my whole life. Now, I had never heard of the term general confession, at least not that I remember, but I just felt inspired by the Holy Spirit to go through my whole life and, like, make a list of everything I had ever done wrong. And I think I was specifically inspired to do this because there were some things coming to my mind that I had never thought of before, like deep interior sins that I had committed, but I didn't even realize it, like holding grudges, things like that. It's like, if you don't examine your conscience really, really deeply, then you're going to kind of brush over certain things. But certain things were coming to my mind, like near the end of these months that I started praying this prayer. So yeah, for context, I started praying this prayer in July of 2019, and this was around January of 2020 that I made this general confession. But yeah, I sat down with the Holy Spirit, wrote down on a piece of paper, like, everything that was coming to my heart, and just like really deep things, letting him guide me. And yeah, I went into confession and I said it all rapid fire, and I had an intention that, like, after this confession, I want this to be a new start. Like, I want to leave behind being kind of in the middle. Like, I want to be all in, like, after this. And when I got out of that confessional, I felt like I was flying. It was amazing. It was the way that I used to feel when I was a very, very young girl, and I forgot that it was possible to feel that way, but it's just like God's presence and just like a feeling of lightness. Like, not even necessarily consolation, but just so much lightness. Like, I felt it, and I never wanted to go back, and I begged him to hold on to me and to never, ever, ever let me go back. And so that's what he did. And I told him I would fall if he didn't hold on to me, and I would want to go back. And I gave him permission, too. Like, if you ever see me wanting to go back to that other way, then just please make my life miserable so I come back to you. Or just kill me. I don't know. He hasn't done any of those things. But it's been an incredible journey. And it was a couple months after that, after I made that general confession, that was like a fresh start. Like a fresh, firm resolve and intention that, like, yeah, I never wanted to sin again. Like, not even a little. Not intentionally, not with the will. And I asked him to give me the grace for that. And yeah, I made the decision there. I wanted to be all in. I wanted to not deny him anything. Like, and it's not that I was perfect. I wasn't. Like, but it's that desire. Like, that desire was firm. And it was a few months after that he introduced me to the Book of Heaven and the Divine Will Writings of Louisa. And I found that I just took off with them. Like, I could not get enough of them. I started reading them like nonstop, and it just like set this fire in me. And like, Jesus says in the writings that the only way to be able to truly understand these writings, and by truly understand, meaning to like penetrate into the heart of them and allow them to like transform you, like, in order to understand these writings, it takes a divine will inside of you, right? And the only way for the divine will to be inside of you is if you dispose yourself to make the sacrifice of sacrifices. And so if it's difficult for you to read, and if you don't have that attraction to read, because the divine will from within you will attract you to be reading these writings, or like listening to them or whatever. Like, not everybody's able to read, and I'm sure there are some exceptions to the rule. Maybe if reading just in general is really difficult for you, like, God can work grace however. But yeah, just in general, as a general rule, if you can't find the motivation to pick up the Book of Heaven and read it, and if you don't understand it, it could be because there is some detachment that needs to happen before you receive that light from within you of living in the divine will. This is an excerpt from September 18th, 1924, volume 17. In order to understand, they would have to dispose themselves to the greatest of sacrifices, that of not giving life even in holy things to their own will. Then would they feel the possession of mine, and would touch with their own hands what it means to live in my will. Yeah, like, when the gift is infused into you, what happens is Jesus just starts teaching you, like, he starts enlightening your mind profoundly, and it is sip by sip, it's little by little, and it's not to say that you just automatically understand, like, a million things at one time. No, like, some things will be hard to understand, but you know divine will is in you if you are experiencing great peace, if you're experiencing enlightenment on these things, if you're starting to just feel and touch and experience, this is what it is to live in the divine will. Like, that means that it's being infused into you, and the more you read and the more you strive to grow and grow and grow, the more it will grow in you. And so yeah, like I said before, I'm not thinking of anyone in particular when I say this. I'm just saying, I think it's very likely that there are people who are reading the Divine Will writings, that are going to Divine Will prayer groups, that are praying all of the Divine Will prayers and saying the formula, the entering in prayer, prevenient act, Jesus, I give you my will, give me yours in return. I want to live in the Divine Will today in all of my actions. But they don't actually have a firm desire. Perhaps there are people that have been living this Divine Will devotional lifestyle for many, many years, who have never actually come to that firm decision of completely disposing themselves to make the sacrifice of losing their rights, right? I think there are people who are reading the Divine Will writings and who probably really think they're living in the Divine Will, but they're not. They're still attached to themselves, they're attached to the world, and they're not willing to be here yet. Yeah, so if I'm making this video for a wide range of people, I'm sure I'll have people who are watching this who have never read Divine Will before, and this is all brand new to them, and I'll probably also have people who have been in the Divine Will for many, many years. Yeah, and I think this speaks to everyone, though. I think it's really, really necessary, all of us, just like continually, and it's a continual growth process too. What I've discovered in the Divine Will too is there's some areas of my heart that he continues to show me more areas that I can surrender to him, more areas that I can give him my will in, tiny, tiny little minuscule things, and so it's a constant growth, it's a constant surrender, and we need to be constantly, not obsessively looking at ourselves at all, but just aware of the state of our hearts. When I give God my will, do I really, really mean it? Am I sincerely giving Jesus my entire being, period? Or am I holding on to something? Do I sincerely want to lay down everything to live in his will? Or am I holding back a little bit? Am I attached to my children? Am I attached to my spouse, my friends, my career, my reputation, my food, my pleasure? Am I attached to a sin? I recommend anyone watching this to really, really pray about this. Really ask the Holy Spirit, because I think something we forget about these writings oftentimes is Louisa went through a boot camp. Jesus took her through the 3 stages of Christian growth and then some. She did not just one day from the world say, oh, I want to live in the Divine Will, and then Jesus gave it to her. No, she had to lose everything. She had to become detached of everything. She had to suffer a lot, really. And of course, none of us will have to suffer as much as Louisa did, because she was the one who formed the kingdom. But Jesus says it takes more work with the first one. But it's still the same path. We can't just skip over the union with God's will. We can't just skip over becoming detached from things. And it is painful, and it is work. And living in the Divine Will is not a magic wand. There's no magic words. There's no specific formula. It is a disposition of heart that is not a natural disposition to have when you're born in original sin. And even if you are a good and holy Catholic who is doing all of the Catholic things and have some million devotions and is, praying 4 rosaries all the time and praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and you have all your Catholic clubs that you get together and do stuff in, okay, that's great, that's wonderful. No, that is wonderful. But are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you doing it with a pure intention? Are you doing it for God, or are you maybe attached to your own sanctity? Are you attached to your own version of... are you attached to looking and appearing holy in front of others? Are you... there's all kinds of hidden loves that we have within us. And if we're doing holy things, because Jesus says in that writing that I read a minute ago, they need to be willing to lose their own life, their own will, even in holy things. And that means doing everything for the pure love of God, for pure love of neighbor. not judging other people, not gossiping about other people. And it's okay if these twinges may come up in us, the twinges of imperfections, like that's totally different. But when it's something in your will, when it's something in your heart that is choosing to do that, that's a big red flag that you're not living in the divine will. It could be a big red flag that you're not. This gift is not something to be taken lightly. And especially, I think people who choose to enter into the divine will and live this life, like, it's really important right now as these writings are really being attacked. There's all kinds of scandal against Louisa, and I mean, I have heard things about certain divine will groups where, certain people in divine will groups will have kind of an attitude of superiority. They'll kind of look down on others, or they'll be like, they say they're living in the divine will and they go to all these divine will cynicals, but then they're backbiting and attacking each other. Like, that's a great scandal. Like, seriously, it's a great scandal for the divine will. And I think the devil specifically targets people who are interested in the divine will because he sees, oh, this is the one thing to attack. I need to attack God's divine will. And if he sees somebody who is maybe a teacher in the divine will, maybe a student in the divine will, just anything divine will, and he sees that there is 1% of a thread that is still attached to themselves, that 1% that's not given over to God, he will grab onto that. If you are interested in divine will, you are a prime target for Satan. I'm telling you that. And if you don't give everything to God, then he will get at you. He will be able to get at you. He will blind you. He will twist it. He will make you inflate your pride because this is the gift of gifts and I'm living in the gift of the divine will and this is the most amazing thing ever, and I'm better than everyone else and I'm going to talk bad about them without even thinking that I'm justified in doing so because I'm just trying to help and I'm the virtue person and I know everything. People need me. Like, there's all kinds of, and they can be very, very sneaky lies, and they can be very, very hidden things deep within our hearts. But if we don't give ourselves utterly to God, if we're not seriously, sincerely, like, looking at the disposition of our hearts and making sure that we are not having one string attached, then this will be very dangerous. The devil will try to get in here. So this has been my introduction of how to receive the gift of the divine will video, and I want to make it clear. If this isn't for you, then this isn't for you. I want to make it clear, you are in for something. This is a complete lifestyle change. You cannot be halfway in, halfway out, because halfway in, halfway out, or 99% in, 1% out of living in the divine will is actually one of the most dangerous places to be, because the devil will get you. He will, and he will twist you to cause harm to the divine will community, and cause others to go away from the gift of the divine will because people are scandalizing others by their example. So all that being said, I would say to anybody who would like advice of where to start if they want to start living in the divine will, and also my advice to anybody who has been studying the writings of Louisa for a long time but maybe feels a little stuck or maybe is still struggling with sin or just motivation at all, I would say the best place to start would be just taking some time, set aside like a day if you can. I think that would be cool. Like, maybe have a time for just a little retreat with you and Jesus, with the Holy Spirit, with the Father, with your Blessed Mother. Just really, really pray. Ask for illumination on the condition of your heart. Ask for illumination on how can I better dispose myself to surrendering my life, to surrendering my will. Like, do I really, really intend and want that God would make of me whatever he wants? Like, truly, do I want to lay down my will and chain it to the foot of his throne to be his footstool and never to have it operate again? If you feel a resistance to any of these questions, then I think it would be really, really good to just take the time to realize this is where we are, this is where you're at. Don't pretend that you're willing to do that if you're not. And just, yeah, it's a great place to be when you're honest with yourself. Like, take some time, really, really pray through it, and decide if you want to do this or not. Because it's a firm decision. It needs to be a real one, right? A mature one. Yeah, and an all or nothing one. Really, really, yeah, you can ask Jesus, you can ask Blessed Mother, you can ask Luisa for help, the Holy Spirit. Yeah, to show you these places and to give you the strength and to increase the desire within you to surrender those places. I think something really good to do is to, like, imagine different scenarios. Like, I don't know, imagining, for example, like the worst thing you could imagine happening. Like, what is that one thing in your life that would just be the death of you? Like, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen? Maybe it's something devastating happening, like, in your family. Like, maybe it's something devastating happening, like, to your career, or anything. And just go through lists of things and imagine, like, would I be willing to give God this? Would I be willing to give God this? Like, what if God took this from me or that? Like, is my heart wanting to grasp on those things, or am I willing to lay them down? Or what if God wants to make of me something that is different than I want to be? What if his dreams for me are different than the dreams that I have for myself? Am I sincerely disposing myself to die to everything? And that time that you set aside to take the time to set that firm decision will be like a firm, solid ground. Because if you try to live in the divine will and, yeah, just like immediately jump in and move ahead and try to do all the acts and the rounds and the fancy stuff, and you don't really have a firm foundation that you are willing to lay down everything, absolutely everything, then you're building a house on sand and it's going to collapse. You're not going to get anywhere, I'm telling you. Yeah, the best thing to do is to build the foundation first. And yeah, that goes for attachments that you have to some of the things that I just mentioned. Yeah, going through scenarios can be really helpful. And also just going through your life and, like, really, really asking the Holy Spirit to illuminate to you, like, sins that you're committing. Maybe they're not so hidden. Maybe they're obvious to you, like you're struggling with a particular sin. Those have to go. They cannot go with you into the divine will. If you want to live the life of the divine will, you've got to cut it off. And yeah, I think a lot of times it's the same thing. It's the same thing with attachments. Like, if you're struggling with a particular sin over and over again, it is because your heart has formed an attachment to it, right? And you may hate it, you may not want to do it ever again, but then somehow it just keeps coming back around, right? Yeah, there's all kinds of factors, of course. There's wounds, there's addictions, there's, yeah, factors. But it is true, with God's grace, deliberate sin of any kind, not just mortal sin, deliberate venial sin, can be overcome. And that's something that's not really talked about, but it's true, it can be. And God wants to give that grace to people. I think most people just don't realize that that's possible. But it is possible, and I think it's really necessary for living in the divine will. Of course, yeah, this is my opinion, but I think it's a pretty backed up opinion in the writings from what I've read. I don't think you can just be committing deliberate sins once you live in the divine will. So God needs to see that you're disposed, that you're very, very serious about that, right? And so these things have to go. So yeah, pray through those things. Make a very, very deliberate decision. I think a lot of times when we have repeated sins that keep coming back and we think we don't want to do them, it's probably that we 95% don't want to do them, but there's 5% of us that wants to, right? Or maybe 99.9%, but that 0.1% that still is attached to that sin, if you find yourself going to confession just knowing that you're going to do it again, and not sincerely putting up a firm intention this, I never want this to happen again. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to stop this so that it never happens again. If you're not going out of that confessional, into and out of that confessional with like a battle plan, then you need to come up with a battle plan. You're not convicted enough to not sin. We have to be 100%. We can't be 99% that we don't want to sin. It's got to be 100%, and we've got to, do everything we possibly can to get rid of it. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. That's what Jesus says. You can't enter the divine will if you're still living attached to sin. The two things don't mix, and in my opinion, I think that is a prerequisite for truly being disposed to make that firm decision. Now, that isn't to say that after you do make that firm decision and you really do receive the gift of living in the divine will, that's not to say that you are automatically perfect and that you never fall again. I think, I don't know, I don't want to cause any scruples in anybody. I want to be firm, as firm as I need to be in this, but also understanding, God sees the heart. He sees like the true intention, the true desire. I'm certainly not going to say that once you enter the divine will, it's absolutely impossible for you to commit a sin that was like kind of deliberate, because there's weakness and different circumstances and things involved. Definitely don't want to excuse it. Definitely don't want to encourage it. I do think it's possible to never have those things happen again. And I want to encourage you in that way, but I also don't want it to become a scrupulous thing. There is a very healthy balance of being taxing on ourselves, really, really being serious, looking in ourselves, and also not navel gazing. Don't keep your eyes on yourself. Like, be aware of yourself, but keep your eyes on him. And ultimately, just you focus on keeping the desires of your heart all for him. Keep the desires of your heart all pure, all intent on him. There will be moments when you slip. There will be moments when you do or say something you regret. There will be moments when you're weak and you're paralyzed, or maybe you fall into an old habit that you really, really didn't want to fall into. But don't worry about it. Don't get all in your head and be like, oh no, I never really made a firm decision. Maybe I wasn't in the divine will. Maybe, okay, I don't know. Maybe you weren't. Maybe that wasn't a firm decision, but like maybe you were. And maybe, Jesus is covering for you because he sees that it wasn't the firm intention of your heart to commit that sin. I don't know. Like I said, these things, it's not extremely clear, but I do know that there were times in Luisa's experience where she had been living in the divine will for a long time, and there is one particular moment. It's so small, but I mean, the sins, quote unquote, that she committed were very, very small, but to her they were huge. And I mean, she'd been given lots and lots of grace, but I think it's encouraging to us that, the overall disposition of her heart was utterly, totally, 100 million%. Like, she would rather die than offend him. She would rather die than to not do his will. But there was a moment, she was a victim soul, right? So she voluntarily offered herself to suffer for souls, and I'll explain more about that later. But she offered herself, to suffer, and one day Jesus came to her with a particular suffering, and she saw that there was fire in his hands. And of course, this was a mystical thing. It wasn't like physically she was going to be on fire, but mystically, her soul was outside of her body, and she saw that Jesus was holding fire, and she just immediately, her humanness just said, "Oh no, Lord, I don't want the fire. I can't do that. I don't want that. I don't want that." And then he said, "Oh, you don't want this? Well, then I'm leaving." And then he left, and then she was like, "Oh no, what did I do? What did I do? Like that? I just sinned." She did not leave the divine will in that instance, because her heart was there, and even as he was leaving, she was like, "No, wait, I want it." But it's it was a human weakness, it was a human frailty, and I've certainly experienced instances very similar to that. Moments of freezing up, moments of not doing what I know he wants me to do because I'm paralyzed by fear or the wounds or whatever. We're on this journey of being purified and perfected after we've made that firm decision. And so it's not that we are instantly just perfect. It's that we firmly desire to be there, and we are doing absolutely everything we can to be there. And so, yeah, not to give any sort of excuse at all to be less exacting upon yourself about staying away from any and every deliberate venial sin and mortal sin, obviously, but also allowing yourself the freedom in knowing that there are different degrees of living in the divine will, and the longer we live in the divine will, the more perfect we become, the more he purifies us. It's kind of like, I see it like you're swallowing a Tide Pod, like a soap thing, and it's cleaning out the insides of your soul, like, and that is the ray of the divine will. And the way that you can get the Tide Pod inside of you is to make the firm desire that you want it to completely clean you out. And so there's a process of it cleaning you out, and that is every time you repeat your acts in the divine will, you're getting more and more and more clean, and he will bring up imperfections that are present in you, areas that are really, really ugly, that are deep down within you. You'll experience like feelings that you didn't know were deep inside of you. It's like dark night of the soul. You're seeing, whoa, I'm a horrible person, but you're not a horrible person. It's just, this is the human condition. We're born with original sin. There's really ugly tendencies that we have, and he has to bring those out so that he can purify them. And he does it very quickly. He tells Louisa that living in the divine will is like, it brings you farther along the path of sanctity very, very, very quickly, because it's God's eternal operating from within you. It's exponential, the progress that a soul can make when they have the gift of the divine will. So we're super, super lucky. I think this video has probably been long enough. I think the next video I'll make will be a continuation of this one, going more into those 4 degrees, what life in the divine will is really like, what to expect once you receive the gift. Yeah, but for now, just know, that disposition, very, very important. Detach your heart from everything and make that firm decision that is mature, that is not subject to changing, and plunge in if that's what you want. And if you don't want it yet, but you want it, then just ask him for help. Take that time, take that retreat day. Pray that he will infuse in you the desire to give everything, to lose all your rights, and know that in losing your rights, you really become the most free and exuberant, joyful person that you could possibly be, because you are the person that the infinite and all-loving Father created you to be. If you give him all your rights, then he's not going to let you down. He's going to make of you the most incredible life that you could possibly dream of, even if it's not what you would have expected. I also want to say, real quick, just to dispel confusion, when we give God our will and ask for his in return, it's not that we cease having freedom. We will always have freedom. We always have our free will. And it's also, he likes to see us spontaneously living life. We don't become slaves. We never become slaves. It's more an intention. We chain our wills to anything that is not what he wants, basically, and offer ourselves to live a life together with him, not separate from him. We still have freedom, and we always will. You'll be extremely happy. You will find invincible joy. There will be suffering. There will be suffering either way, but if you live in the divine will and decide to embrace the cross, then you'll be able to find joy in the cross. You'll just have to embrace it. It's a process. It's a journey. Get rid of all sin. We can't be wanting any of that at all. Cut it all off. Know that God will give you the grace if you ask for it and sincerely desire it. Go visit Jesus in adoration as often as you can. Pray the rosary every day. Those graces will help you so much. This is our Blessed Mother's gift. You need to stay close to her. She'll help. I think, actually, I'd like to read, to close this off, I'd like to read a little excerpt from the Virgin Mary in the Kingdom of the Divine Will. So this is the month of May also. I highly recommend you all read from the Virgin Mary in the Kingdom of the Divine Will during the month of May. There are daily reflections. We're already, a ways into May, but you can be a little bit behind. That would be okay. But yeah, Mary teaches us step by step every day little reflections on how to live in the divine will, and it's very, very wonderful. She'll guide you in everything. So this is from day 1. I'm going to read it to close us off. Now, child of my heart, listen to your mama. Banish your human will. Content yourself with dying rather to concede one act of life to it. Your celestial mama would have been content with dying thousands and thousands of times rather than do one single act of my will. Do you not want to imitate me? If you will keep it sacrificed in honor of your Creator, the divine will take the first step in your soul, and you will feel molded with a celestial aura, purified and warmed in such a way as to feel the seeds of your passions being annihilated. You will feel placed on the first steps of the kingdom of the divine will. Therefore be attentive. If you are faithful in listening to me, I will guide you, I will lead you by the hand along the interminable ways of the divine will. I will keep you sheltered under my blue mantle, and you will be my heart, my glory, my victory, as well as yours.